a right-wing politician who is in the right place at the right time. She's helped, of course, by the fact that there is a sort of surge across Europe of what one might call right-wing or nationalist populism. And she is very much seen as the figurehead of that.
Hello and welcome back to Spectator TV. Today I am delighted to be joined by a Spectator icon, Nick Farrell, who is in Italy wearing, as you will see, a French beret, we think. It's Latin enough, because we're going to be talking about Italy and Giorgia Meloni in particular, because Giorgia Meloni, the Italian Prime Minister, has emerged as a serious power player in the last couple of years. Not so long ago, she was frequently dismissed as a far-right figure, even after she won her election in Italy. But these days, European leaders and even American statesmen seem to be queuing up to pay homage to her and to work with her. And as Nick Farrell has put it in a soon-to-be-published piece in the Spectator's World edition, when President Trump wants to call Europe, he speaks to Giorgia Meloni. Nick, thank you very much for coming on to Spectator TV. How has Giorgia Meloni, in quite a short space of time really, completely transformed her image in the international media and among the sort of political class?
Well, I think she's because she represents what people want, rather than what politicians have been giving them. So in other words, she's, they want to get tough on immigration. They want to be protected from unfair foreign competition. They want money in their pocket. They want decent jobs, all these kind of things. And she promises that to them, even if she doesn't necessarily deliver everything she promises, but at least she's trying. So I suppose she's a right-wing politician who is in the right place at the right time. She's helped, of course, by the fact that there is a sort of surge across Europe of what one might call right-wing or nationalist populism. And she is very much seen as the figurehead of that.
It's on immigration, isn't it, that she has had quite a lot of success as a politician and some success in policy as well. She has developed this policy of offshoring migrants to third country, Albania in Italy's case. And this was something Britain tried to do under the Tories with Rwanda, but has now given up under the Labour Party. But Meloni seems to have developed this plan with Albania quite successfully, and other countries are looking at it as a potential model for how to deal with the problem of massive illegal migration.
Yeah, well, that's one major part of her strategy. However, it is on hold at the moment, thanks to Italian judges who refuse to allow her to send any migrants there at the moment. I mean, she started this, the scheme actually got off the ground in Albania in October last year, but when she tried to send migrants there, the judges said, no, you can't. The only migrants that she wanted to send were from designated safe countries, i.e. migrants who are, technically speaking, obviously not refugees, and so their asylum claims would be refused. And such countries include Bangladesh and Egypt, which aren't at war, of course, and which is where most of, or many of Italy's migrants come from. But the first load to be sent there were sent straight back because judges in Rome said that parts of Bangladesh and parts of Egypt were not safe. And this now is being decided once and for all by the European Court of Justice, which is due to decide in June, very soon. And it's thought that it's going to side with Meloni, which will enable her to restart this scheme. I mean, in the meantime, she has been sending other migrants to Albania. These are migrants whose asylum applications have been refused in Italy and who are and have been served with deportation orders. The policy has proved incredibly popular, not just with Europe's right-wing parties, but also left-wing parties. And Ursula von der Leyen, who is a centrist, the EU Commission's president, who she is pretty close to on the immigration issue, has described this as out-of-the-box thinking. Interestingly, Keir Starmer, our very own Keir Starmer, the ex-human rights supremo, who on day one of his premiership cancelled the Tories' Rwanda offshore scheme, has actually met Meloni a couple of times to talk about migration, said she's making remarkable progress and wants to copy her offshore scheme. He tried to convince the Albanian president, Edi Rama, to allow him to set up centers for British migrants in Albania, but Rama refused. He's now thought to be talking to other Balkan countries such as Serbia and Montenegro. But this isn't the only part of her strategy, of course.
Let's talk about that in a minute. I just wanted to ask, though, her popularity in Italy seems pretty strong. I just wondered whether, given that she was her emergence in some ways linked to this populist national conservatism that's spreading all over the developed world, and that often is a protest vote, in a way, a protest against the elites, the ruling parties, the establishment, and so on. I wondered if Meloni's increasing success with statesmen like Keir Starmer and even Ursula von der Leyen, her increasingly good relations with them, whether that was causing some suspicion and hatred of her among the Italian electorate that once quite liked her.
Like all successful politicians, it's not just one group of people that supports them, is it? It's a whole range of groups. And in her case, it is impossible. Well, there's no point denying it. The far right and ex-fascist and even some fascists in Italy support her or have supported her. There aren't many actual proper fascists in Italy, really, despite what you're told. Who stand around with shaven heads and black shirts, giving the Roman salute and all that sort of thing. There are very, very few of those. But I suppose there are probably quite a lot of what you might call far right people. But they're a minority of her supporters. But they would be very annoyed with her striking up any kind of rapport with anyone who they consider not just left wing but even centrist. It's a bit like Farage, isn't it, in England, where he sort of hits out at the Tories for being feeble and centrist and not nearly far right and not right wing enough, let's say. So there is a certain amount of that, but on the other hand, I think Italians are actually very impressed with the way she has been able to stamp her personality on the world stage and become such a key figure and such a talked about figure. And much of the talk is positive, not negative.
One of the issues where she seems to have been pretty nimble is Ukraine. After she came into power, the Ukraine war began, and she surprised some observers who thought that she might be suspiciously Putin-y, similar to Matteo Salvini, who is a junior partner in her coalition. But she, in fact, became out very, very strongly for Ukraine against Russia and put Italy as part of the sort of the coalition of the willing against the Russian invasion. And yet now, as the international politics have changed, she seems to have fallen a bit more in line with Donald Trump's view of the Ukraine conflict, which is that peace is the priority. Is my analysis vaguely right?
Yeah, no, well, it's dead right, and it begs a lot of questions. The first thing is, yes, you're right. Unlike a lot of so-called far-right politicians, not just Salvini, who is head of the League, a party called La Lega, the League, which was much more successful than her party, but then lost a lot of support after joining a coalition government with the anti-establishment populist Five Star movement. Lost a lot of support over that by jumping into bed with the so-called enemy. So now it's a minor party. But if you look at, say, for somebody like Marine Le Pen in France, for example, who has been notoriously close to Putin, it's true that the far right has tended, the so-called far right, because, I personally don't think that much of what such parties propose is far right, but there we go. It's more like traditional conservative. But anyway, certainly they were pro-ish Putin, pro-Putin if we want. And the reason being that they saw him as a defender of traditional Christian values. Obviously his invasion of Ukraine doesn't fit into that, but so yes, she was very different to this, Meloni, and even though she has in the past been sort of in favor of Putin before he started causing trouble, for the same reason that she saw him as an ally, let's say, in the battle to defend traditional Christian values. Over Ukraine, she sided 100% with Biden, who, being a Democrat, ought to have been her enemy, and was one of the most devout supporters of his policy, his program of arming and aiding Ukraine. She did this principally because she is absolutely determined that Italy and Europe should be allied to America, whoever is in power in America, whether Democrats or Republicans. And this is very unusual for a European politician, especially one from a right-wing background such as hers. If you think about French politicians have been notoriously hostile to America. So it was very interesting that she stuck with Biden through thick and thin. She was almost as devout a supporter of him as Boris Johnson was, and the Polish government was. She was one of the few European leaders to get the special invite to the White House, where he kissed her on the head and said, "We're close friends," and played "I Am Georgia" on the sound system, that sort of thing. And then with Biden out of the way, she suddenly changes her tune and supports Trump's "let's just get peace done" policy. You could say she is an opportunist, but on the other hand, that she is unprincipled, that she supports whichever American is in power. But on the other hand, many people, not just her, now believe, people who used to support arming Ukraine, now believe that Ukraine can't possibly win, and what's the point of it continuing to fight? And therefore, the only solution is peace, even if that means Ukraine losing territory. And that is the position she is in now, and therefore she supports Trump trying to get peace done. I mean, she doesn't, however, agree with the Coalition of the Willing, this famous group of founded by Macron and Starmer, with the idea of sending a peacekeeping force to Ukraine if and when a peace deal is done. She refuses to contemplate the idea of sending Italian troops to Ukraine. And so she's been notably absent from their meetings. She also sees their attempts to participate or interfere in Trump's peace process as provocative and counterproductive. So that's caused a lot of friction especially with Macron.
Well, back to her Italian domestic politics. Italy has long been considered a kind of economic basket case, even though in many ways its economy, despite having many problems, is quite powerful. She has made some strides on unemployment and issues like that, and she's proving to be quite a successful politician on the domestic front for that reason, is she not?
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the criticisms her many opponents made when she became prime minister was that she would be a disaster for the economy. But she's effectively stabilized the economy. The economy is stable. She's not doing anything wild in terms of spending. She's trying to help. She's trying to help the low paid, and she's trying to create jobs. I mean, she claims she's created 1 million jobs a year since she came to power in 22. Certainly, unemployment has gone down by quite a lot, from 8% to 6%, which is more or less a historic low for Italy. Meanwhile, the national debt is astronomical, second highest in Europe still, but that's a historical problem that Italy's had for many decades. It's coming down, though, substantially. It's come down roughly 30%, I think, in the last 2 or 3 years, as has the deficit as a percentage of GDP, i.e. the difference between what government gets in and what it spends. That's come down now from about 7%, I think, to 3%, so 3.5%, so which is more or less the level that the EU insists deficit should be in the Eurozone. But so in other words, she's doing a reasonable job, let's say, on the economy. It's not great, GDP growth is pretty feeble, but then it is across Europe. I mean, Germany's been in recession for at least a year, although it's slightly coming out of it now, I think. But she's not. She certainly hasn't done a Liz Truss on the economy, which is what a lot of people feared she would do, and a lot of people fear that somebody like Marine Le Pen would do in France, with all her wild, if she ever came to power, with all her wild spending ideas to defend the French working class.
Well, you mentioned Liz Truss, you mentioned Marine Le Pen, and of course this is a big part of Giorgia Meloni's political personality, is that she's a woman, and she plays, to a certain extent, I think it's fair to say, on her womanhood in public. She is charming, occasionally flirtatious with world leaders, and powerful men, seem to warm to her. Joe Biden, you mentioned, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, who had to actually go on Twitter or X to state that he was not going to have a romantic relationship with Giorgia Meloni.
That he wasn't having one.
That he wasn't having one.
Going to.
He wasn't going to. He wasn't having one. He wasn't having one. But this is an interesting part of her appeal, is her femininity.
Yes, indeed. it's always interesting when women have power. We saw that with Thatcher. We probably saw it with Boadicea. And Elizabeth I. But yes, I mean, the effect. She is often the only woman in the room, which, amongst very powerful alpha men who lead very powerful countries. And she is, yes, she is. Well, she's young. She's pretty good looking. She's a bit on the short side for somebody like me, who's 6'3". But nevertheless, she's very, very good looking, really. She's extremely charming. She has a great sense of humor. She loves a joke. She's very tactile, which is very Italian. She's constantly hugging people and holding hands. I mean, there's a famous photo of her holding both hands with our own Rishi Sunak at the G7 in Puglia, Italy, in which she hosted in June 24, a month before he lost power. She's, I mean, basically, she comes from a working class background. Really, this is the interesting thing about her. She didn't go to university. She was a brilliant student, but couldn't afford to go to university. And she she still has a very strong Roman accent. I suppose it's a bit like, if you think about an English woman, female politician with a Cockney accent or something. I mean, this is what we're talking about. Somebody with the gift of the gab. She ran a market stall when she was a young woman. And you can imagine her sort of shouting to all her colleagues in the marketplace, sort of exchanging banter with them. It's a bit like that, really. And she is, so yes, the fact that yes, I mean, it certainly has an effect. I mean, as I said, Joe Biden kissed her on the head. I mean, he's extremely tall.
Well, yeah, and he also kissed lots of people on the head.
There's this, a couple of weeks ago, this incredible scene in Tirana, Albania, when Edi Rama, the Albanian prime minister, who's a 6'7" ex-basketball player, was on the red carpet to meet European leaders coming into the summit that he was hosting. When she arrived, he went down on one knee, put his hands together as if in prayer, as if she had arrived like manna from heaven. And she said, "Oh, Eddie." And then he got up and they hugged, and, it's completely different to how you might expect, world leaders to behave. But on the other hand, it's quite refreshing in a way.
It does seem quite refreshing. Nick, I think we'll end it there, but thank you very much for coming on Spectator TV, and hope to talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks.